Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the first of our series of family education nights for the 2022-23 school year. My name is Holly Peel, and I'm the director of Northstar's Career Center. I'd like to introduce Kristen Parson, who is our Career Center's case manager. We also are very happy to have with us Tamara Wayne and Jessica Marshall, who are representing Career Support Systems, and Amanda Havel from the Greater Richmond DARS office. So thanks everyone for being here. I'm so happy to have you join us. We have quite a turnout tonight. Lots of people who have, I'm sure, a lot of questions and a lot of interest in this topic. So we're going to start by letting Amanda go ahead and take it away and present. Amanda, we're so grateful for your time and for your expertise. Amanda serves as the manager of the Greater Richmond DARS office, and so she is in charge of a lot of the folks who would work with most of Northstar's families. Not everyone, so she'll get into some of those details, but she's going to give us an introduction of what the Department of Aging and Rehabilitation Services is, what they offer, how you can go through eligibility, and most especially she's going to talk about pre-employment transition services, or PREETs. So I hope that everyone is ready to learn a lot, because I've previewed the presentation. It's very dense. So Amanda, without further ado, I will let you take it away. The rest of us are going to turn off our cameras and let you move on with the show.
Great. Thank you, Holly. I am pleased to be here. Let me get this PowerPoint open for us here. So yes, I was going to start with talking a little bit about pre-employment transition services, and then we'll segue a little bit into VR services, vocational rehabilitation services. DARS stands for the Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services. Our division, which is the Division of Rehabilitation Services, administers the VR program and is more involved with the employment piece of things. We do have a separate office for aging services and some additional services offered to the disability community in general, helping to oversee and provide technical assistance to some of the local centers for independent living as well. Here's a little bit of information about the DARS Greater Richmond office, which is where I'm located. We have offices across the state. There are several more in our area. Our office covers everywhere from Goochland over to the central area, including Richmond City, Hanover, and Henrico counties, and then into the Middle Peninsula and over to New Kent and Charles City. We also have a separate office which serves individuals who reside in Chesterfield County, Powhatan, and a sister office in Farmville. And then there's also a Petersburg office in our local area. Our additional contacts for our area include Sharina Sewell, who is our Capital District Director, and Talisha McAuley Davis, who is the unit supervisor in my office, serving Greater Richmond. We do have counselors who are assigned to local schools, the local public schools, as well as many of our specialty private day schools. Currently, we do have a vacancy for the counselor position, which had previously been assigned to Northstar Academy and the Career Center. So currently I am the primary contact, and we will be working as a team in our office to assist students and individuals to make sure folks are moving along in the midst of our vacancy. With this PowerPoint, I also have a link to our DARS office directory. So information is there regarding the other offices, the contact information, as well as the management team for those offices. So a little more about DARS in general. As I mentioned, we administer the vocational rehabilitation program for the state of Virginia. And in a nutshell, what we do is assist individuals who have a disability with preparing for, finding, and maintaining work. Our focus is on employment, and participation is always voluntary. When it comes to pre-employment transition services, DARS and schools partner in order to work towards the common goal of making sure the students are successful as they transition into the world of work or transition into their post-secondary plans. The WIOA, Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act, created a framework related to pre-employment transition services, or PREETs, and how DARS and schools should be partnering in order to deliver those services to students with disabilities. At times, we also may join with some partnering agencies in the community, such as Career Support Systems, whom is also here tonight. So what are PREETs? We look at PREETs as the very first service that our agency might provide to students with disabilities. We might think of it as a continuum or an upside down triangle, where PREETs might be along the very broad top outer edge. And then as more information is gathered, we might become a little more individualized and pinpoint services and other opportunities directed towards students. PREETs is only available to students with disabilities. However, students do not have to be DARS clients in order to receive PREETs. So what's the criteria? Students would need to be at least 14 and be receiving special education services. Usually that means they have an IEP or a 504 plan. If someone is not receiving services under one of those, then we could accept a PREETs referral along with some other type of disability documentation. Referrals most often come from our school partners. And a complete referral includes a PREETs release and consent form, which most of all of our school partners should have already. If not, I'd be happy to forward one to you. And also that disability documentation that I referenced. And the reason that it's helpful for the school to be able to partner with the DARS counselor in transferring those referrals back and forth is because the consent can easily be packaged along with that disability documentation that the school likely already has on file. However, we are certainly happy to accept referrals from parents directly or other service providers or community partners that we have as well. There are 5 required PREETs services. They're listed here. We'll get a little bit more into detail for each one of them in the next few slides. And when it says required, that means it's required by the WIOA, that federal regulation that I referenced earlier, for our agency to offer these specific PREETs activities. However, which ones an individual student may receive or how they are provided may vary based on the student, what's available at the school, and what the transition needs are. Job exploration counseling is often used to assist students with determining what types of potential jobs are available, what their interest may be, what may motivate them, their preferences. This may be accomplished with the use of interest inventories or other activities, job family trees, and other investigative methods to research different types of occupations and career pathways. Work-based learning experiences allow students to have more of a hands-on opportunity to engage and understand knowledge and skills that might help them to be more successful in real life work activities. And some examples might include job site tours, informational interviews, job fairs, or having employer guest speakers. Counseling on opportunities for enrollment in post-secondary education might involve sharing information or researching information about different training options, be it college or a vocational training or credential. It also might include apprenticeships or information about how to access certain types of services on a college campus, including the Office for Student Accommodations and other information that may be needed in order to be successful in a post-secondary educational environment. Workplace readiness training is more of what we might consider soft skills and employability skills. So talking about employer expectations, practicing interview skills, mock interviews, writing resumes, practicing and filling out employment applications, discussing appropriate workplace attire or communication skills, professionalism. We have a lot of different activities that our agency and counselors have developed. And we have kind of not a set curriculum at this time, but a warehouse of different activities. And one of the ones that is very popular for work readiness training includes a clothes bag grab, where the counselor would bring a bunch of different articles of clothing, and then the students would be tasked with putting together a potential interview outfit. And there's usually a very wide variety of clothes, and then they would also talk about whether it would be appropriate or not, you know, a tank top versus slacks versus a collared shirt, for example. Instruction in self-advocacy is also very important. We want our young folks to be able to make sure that they are comfortable and confident when they are communicating their thoughts, their needs, and their interests or their concerns. And so we work with them on understanding their rights and responsibilities, how to request accommodations, either in the workplace or in the school setting, and other activities that might help them with being more of an advocate for themselves as they transition away from high school. So again, pre-employment transition services are really the first step towards vocational rehabilitation and the first step in services that are provided by DARS. So I mentioned that pre-ETS is only available to students with disabilities. So what happens when an individual either no longer meets that student criteria, or they are no longer interested in receiving the pre-employment transition services? There are basically two options. One is to proceed with an application for our vocational rehabilitation services. And this can really happen at any time, even before someone might exit their school program. If we see that there is a more individualized need already, then we might suggest proceeding with a VR case even before graduation, or even in earlier sophomore or junior year, depending on the situation. Or if the student prefers, they could certainly seek employment on their own or continue with post-secondary plans independently, hopefully using some of the skills they might have gained through participating in pre-ETS. And if in the future they see that they may want or need additional help, they are certainly always welcome to apply for VR services at any time. So I'm going to take a look at the chat real quick here, because okay. We'll talk a little bit about the question that I received. Thank you. I think that question may be best asked to the during the supported employment section here, so we can get to that in a moment, or perhaps Tamara and Jessica could address that. All right, so Moving into a little bit of information about the VR program. So let's say the student with a disability has been receiving pre-ETS services, perhaps only through a pre-ETS case or a student-only case, and hadn't yet applied for VR services. So what happens? So usually the first step would be an intake meeting or a meeting for the DARS counselor to assist the individual with completing the VR application. I've also linked to this presentation our website specifically related to how VR works. And so you're welcome to take a look at our website. There's a lot of really good information related to transition services, as well as vocational rehabilitation, as well as the business services that we offer to employers. As I mentioned, the intake appointment, during that time, the counselor and the individual are getting to know each other. The counselor will be asking questions to help determine what areas of need, what areas of strengths, interests are may be indicated by this individual. They're also going to be gathering some information which will help them determine the eligibility for the VR program, their eligibility for services. During the intake, the counselor is likely going to be asking questions that will also help with future planning for employment services. As part of the eligibility determination process, the counselor may ask the individual to assist with gathering existing records related to the disability, which will help with the determination process. And what the counselor is looking for is documentation of the diagnosis as well, or diagnoses, as well as functional limitations related to that diagnosis or disorder, what the symptoms are, and how that impacts the person's ability to be able to maintain successful employment. Excuse me. Once the person is determined eligible for the VR program, the counselor and consumer will continue their conversation and meet again, to maybe multiple times in some instances, to work on developing the employment plan, which we call the Individualized Plan for Employment, or IPE, which sometimes may be confused with an IEP, but it is different. The basic components of the IPE include the vocational goal that the consumer and counselor agree will be a good fit for the consumer based on their unique interests, abilities, skills, needs, as well as the labor market, because we always want to make sure we're working towards a job that's actually available in the local area or the area where the person plans to be living. After the services are provided, then we focus a little more on preparing for the job search and focusing on actually getting the employment within the vein of that vocational goal selected to guide the plan. And the DARS counselor or other DARS staff or other community partners that we may be working with alongside the consumer, we are all partners in the process. DARS is not a direct placement type of organization. We work very hard to make sure that each of our individual consumers are as prepared as possible to meet the entry-level criteria for that job of interest or the job on their IPE. But we're out there helping them to find the same types of jobs, competitive, integrated positions that everyone else is also looking for. So it's not something where we just have a drawer full of jobs that we're able to plug folks in. That's often a misconception. So I wanted to mention that as well. So you might be wondering, what are some examples of VR services? And again, these are all guided by the IPE, so it will look a little different for every individual based on what the goal is, based on what the person's barriers to employment are, and what their other needs may be, to help make sure that they are prepared for this type of employment. We offer no-cost services typically provided by our in-house staff. Counselors would be providing career counseling and guidance, job seeking skills. We have staff that work closely with individuals on their resumes and job seeking skills, interview skills, mock interviews. We also have in-house vocational evaluators. If there is any concern or question as to what type of job may be a good fit, we can offer more targeted assessment to help determine that. We also have assistive technology staff available to determine if there are adaptive equipment needs and what recommendations there may be for adaptive software as well. On the job training is also a no-cost service. And some examples of cost services are tools or equipment, be they assistive technology equipment or tools needed for a particular occupation. Cosmetology comes to mind when I think about tools, because often folks in that field are going to need some sort of kit or starter equipment, particularly if they are going to be, depending on the salon or where they may be working. Job coaching is also an example of cost services, vocational training, vehicle modification, home modifications. And I also noted there that all of these cost services are subject to the DAR's financial participation policy or financial needs test. So the no cost services are always going to be no cost. And then the cost services, if they are agreed to as part of the plan, we would do a financial needs test to determine whether or not the consumer and or family would need to pay towards the cost of services. Depending on the specific situation of that individual, DARS may be able to cover all of the cost services, and sometimes someone may be 100% responsible for the cost services. If that's the case, then that family or consumer may choose to proceed only with non-cost services, or DARS can assist with linking them with providers to whom they can do a self-payment to receive those same services. And that was what I wanted to share in a nutshell. I know it was kind of pretty fast-paced and a lot of information. I'm going to stop here.
That was fantastic information. Thank you for presenting it so clearly and concisely. And it was really broken out. And I noticed you really addressed some areas that, as I've worked with families over the years, areas where those questions have come up. So 2 places that we deal with questions every year is, well, we think we have an open case with DARS because we met with the pre-eds counselor last year, and just making sure that families understand that there are 2 different programs, and just because you met with a pre-eds counselor once doesn't mean that, hey, now eligibility has been determined and you can now receive VR services, which includes job coaching services. And then the second piece being the difference between pay and no pay services, and understanding that there is a type of financial eligibility. Could you clarify for me, is it the policy that if a person receives SSI, does that mean that they meet that financial eligibility to have those cost services covered if it's part of their IPE?
Yes, there are several instances where the financial needs, someone is exempt from the financial participation policy, and 2 of those instances are if the person receives SSI themselves, or if they are the beneficiary or disabled worker claimant, or the, I believe it's a disabled adult child. Jessica might know better than I the exact moniker, but receiving SSDI themselves, then they would be exempt from our financial participation policy, and therefore, yes, we would be able to pay all cost services that are included on the IPE.
And that's a great piece of information to know. I know we counsel a lot of families, and they ask, what are some of the benefits of applying for SSI if we don't want our young adult child to ever have to collect SSI. We want them to be out in the workforce. And that is certainly something that we like to touch on. We also had a question in the chat that says, how do you guys handle funding budget cuts when it comes to disability services?
Good question. So we haven't been in a situation where there have been a lot of issue with that in the last several years. When the VR program is in financial dire straits, I guess I'll say. I hate to put it that way, but that's what comes to mind. What we do is actually operate an order of selection. So there's a standardized process to start categorizing folks and putting them on a wait list based on the number of functional limitations that they have. And then we would prioritize those categories. So typically, if we are on order of selection, we might close a category or two or more at a time. And then we focus on prioritizing the folks that are going to need the most help, which would be in category 1, or folks who have the most significant disabled or at least 3 functional limitations. And then we would open and close categories based on the amount of funding that is available. But again, we haven't had that situation in a number of years.
Which is great.
Yeah.
I worked for several years while y'all were in order of selection, and definitely we've seen better outcomes for our students and our families since that has no longer been the case. Well, thank you again for your presentation and for your time. And I hope you'll hang around so that if we have people who have questions at the end, you'll be able to address them. And at this time, I'd like to invite Jessica and Tamara from Career Support Systems to come on back. There we go. And I know they have an incredible wealth of information to share. So Career Support Systems is an employment services organization, sometimes abbreviated ESO. And they work with DARS clients, providing many of the services that Amanda just outlined. And one of those services that we haven't touched on yet is so fantastic that it now exists, because it didn't always, which are WISA services. And that has to do with helping people manage their financial benefits. So I am so pleased that both of you ladies are donating your time this evening to support our families and our community and to get the word out about all of these rich resources that are available.
Thank you for having us. We are happy to be here. We also have a third young man on the call, Samaj. He's going to pop in. Samaj and Tamara are both employment consultants with Career Support Systems, and I am currently the waiver services coordinator, and I do benefits planning as well. So I'm going to go through a quick PowerPoint just on services and what you can expect. And then Tamara and Samaj might have a few things to add, and then we'll be here to answer any questions that you have. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So obviously, we are Career Support Systems. We are what's considered an employment service organization. And there are lots of us out there in the Richmond area. So you will get your choice of which ESO you'd like to work with. A little bit about us. We were founded in 1993. By Joanne Ellis and Lance, who are still with the company and work as partners for most of the state of Virginia. We are accredited through CARF, which is a process that says we are meeting the goals set forth by the state. Basically, what we want to do is promote independence and self-sufficiency for those who have barriers to employment or disabilities. And we want to be a community leader and a name that people recognize that we give good services. Some of the things that we do, which Amanda had also touched on, is supported employment, job placement training, situational assessments, the pre-ETS program, job retention services, or what we consider follow along. We do benefits planning and targeted outreach. We work with each customer and individualize a plan that works for them. Sometimes we start with pre-ets. Other times we might start with a situational assessment, which is a period of time where we work with an individual in a job that they think they may want, to see how well they can handle the workload, how they interact with those around them, and if it'll be a good fit. A lot of times we hear that somebody wants to work with animals, and we've had somebody where we did a situational assessment, and we took them into a vet office and found out that they were actually allergic to cats. So that was not going to work as an employment goal anymore. So that's one of the things this situational assessment will help with. Job development services run the gamut. We start with interview preparation, resume preparation. We help an individual during an interview, the process. Sometimes we work separately with them on that before they actually have an interview. We fill out applications. We are in the community with the individual, introducing them to potential employers and trying to set up contacts. And then we move into job placement and training once somebody has a job. One of the biggest questions we get asked all the time is, how soon will somebody be working? Well, it depends really on what their goal is and what's available at the time. It can take a week, it can take 3 months or more. So it's really dependent on the individual and what they're looking for. So job placement training services would be someone that we have helped get their job. So now we're going to work with them so they can retain that job. And that includes orientation with them, filling out any paperwork that needs to be done, going with them to their job to learn what their job duties are and to help them learn how they're supposed to perform their job tasks and meet employer expectations. Our ultimate goal is always to kind of fade out over time so the individual is successful on their own, but we offer follow-along service at work. We're always kind of in the background, checking in a couple times a month just to see how somebody's doing, to address any concerns or problems that have come up, and to communicate with the employer. So we have had some individuals in follow-along for 10 years. So that's a great service and a great safety net for someone to have. Another big service that we provide is the benefits planning services. So those who have SSI or SSDI or some type of benefit will understand how working could potentially affect what they get, what benefits they get. And it helps the individual and the family make an informed decision about whether or not working is a good option for the individual. Again, vocational services, we work with each person individually. Amanda mentioned the IPE. We do something that's called an ISP, which is an individualized support plan. We sit down with the person after we've done their intake, and we use this as a roadmap or a contract of what services we're going to provide, what the individual can expect from us, and what we can expect from the individual. So we set goals specific to their ultimate vocational goal, whether it's a situational assessment or somebody wants to work with animals. And then once we get that job, those goals have to change. So we'll do another ISP. And again, the supports that we provide help the individual understand that if you want help with this, with filling out applications, we can do that. If you need help building a resume, we can do that. In return, I expect you to communicate with me on if you are unable to attend an appointment, or if there's a barrier that we need to discuss. So it really is a great tool for helping each person understand what services they can expect. This is a little bit about pre-ETs that Amanda has talked about, so I'm not really going to go into it too much. Tamara has done a lot of pre-ET services with us, so she can also touch on that. We work with all kinds of individuals. So individuals with barriers to employment, disabilities, reentry, TANF. We kind of run the gamut of who we work with. Most of our referrals will come through DARS or social services or the Department of Blind and Visual Impairment and community service boards. But these are some other partnering agencies that we have worked with in the past. So typically when we get a referral from one of these agencies, they are the funding source. We do have private pay options as well if you don't qualify for services with an agency. Our coverage area is pretty much all of Virginia, except up near DC and out to the east in the Chesapeake area. So we go from Northern Virginia all the way down to North Carolina and then out to Tennessee. So it's a large coverage area. Most of you guys, I think, since you are attending or associated with the Northstar Academy, will be in the Richmond area. So you'll be working with our office in the Central Virginia if you choose to work with us as your ESO. So our goal is always to provide guidance and information and individualized services. We are outcome-based, which is what those goals are. And that's what runs our business. We provide, like I said, a very customized individual plan for each individual that we work with. This is just a kind of number of placements we've had across the state in the past months up through COVID-19. And we're still growing. So each month we have lots of placements across Virginia. And then, as I mentioned, Joanne Ellis and Lance Elwood are our founding partners. They are our leadership team along with regional directors. The regional director for the central area is Christopher Hicks. So he would be a good contact for you as well. And I think that Holly has made this PowerPoint available to you for reference, and we can also make sure that you get Chris's contact information as well. So we can field some questions if I can pull up the chat box. And if Tamara or Samaj want to jump in and talk a little bit about what you do as employment consultants, that would be great.
Best screensaver ever.
Sorry.
Samaj, welcome. I'm sorry I didn't introduce you before. We had, happily, we've got a long list of participants, so I didn't see you when you popped in. So welcome and thank you so much for being here. We had a great question pop up in the chat a little bit ago. Let's see. How do you find the right job coach, and can you change your plan after it has been created?
Good question. The way we kind of do it with career support is once Chris receives that referral and sees what the vocational goal is and meets with the person or talks with them, he tries to set them up with one of the employment consultants on his team that he thinks will be the best fit. If that turns out that it's not the case, you can always request to work with another employment consultant until you find one that you feel is a good fit for your son, daughter, child. And then if a goal changes, we can always adjust our plan to meet the individual's needs. Like I said, and want to stress that our services are very individualized depending on the person and what they want to do. So that would be how we take care of that.
Great.
I see another question about how services of DARS and CSS differ. I can tell you that CSS is an employment service organization. So we are specifically for employment. DARS does a whole lot of other services and provides a lot of other different supports, which I'm sure Amanda can touch on as well.
And if I can just encapsulate some of this, because I think it gets a little bit overwhelming, especially for some of our parents of younger students who are just learning this for the first time. So let's say you have a student who's 14, 15, 16 years old. That student is receiving special education services. And you're wondering, okay, I want my almost young adult to enter the workforce. I want this person to be independent. This person will probably need some support, but maybe I'm going to be able to provide the support. Maybe we'll need it. Maybe we don't. I don't know. My child is maturing rapidly. I'm not sure what's going to happen because, of course, this is a time of incredibly dynamic change. So how does this all work? Well, what you do is you go to your special education case manager. And you go to case manager and you say, I'd really like to explore pre-ET services. And that case manager through the school is going to be able to help you complete that application and submit it to DARS. And then DARS will connect you with that school's pre-ETs designee if you meet the eligibility requirements. And that's when you can start doing some career exploration activities. Maybe a DARS counselor will provide those to you directly. But maybe your needs are more, you need a more individualized plan, in which case, instead of DARS providing those services directly, they will work with an employment services organization who has a vendor relationship with them and will pay that organization to provide those services. Much like Northstar has about 60% publicly placed students for those school systems who couldn't provide educational services directly to those students. Those school systems pay tuition for those students to receive educational services from Northstar. So it's a similar relationship where, yes, DARS as a state agency, a governmental agency, does provide quite a few services, a huge gamut of services directly. But there may be some cases which clients will work with an employment services organization to receive those services. So time goes by, the person is getting closer to graduating, not sure if we want to try for VR services, not clear if we need to. Yes, you need to. It's a matter of working with your DARS contact or counselor, or maybe your special education case manager again, to apply for eligibility to move into those VR services. And maybe you're thinking about Medicaid waiver, that's another avenue. Or you're working with your CSB, your Community Services Board, that's another avenue to maybe access these services. So really working with your team as you're getting close to exit from school to understand, okay, who's going to help hook me up to these services? Am I going to go straight to an ASO? Am I going to go through DARS? Am I going to go through my case manager through CSB? How is this going to work? But all of those are avenues to supported employment. Then let's say and you want to get a part-time job, but you're going to need a little bit of assistance with that. And then you get a job offer. Well, oh no, I've started these supported employment service processes. Do I have to accept them? No, we're all going to be happy for you. If you get a job offer and you can do that independently, no one is going to be upset or sad that you've moved forward independently. But it's always a great idea to go ahead and explore getting these services in place, because I think everyone here can agree with me, these things don't happen overnight, right? This is an eligibility process, and then you have an intake, and then you have a meeting, and then you come up with this individualized plan. All of those things are a process of getting to know multiple people and helping build that plan. So it's always a good idea to get that ball rolling and make sure you are networked with the sources of services and information that you need. So if you do get that job offer and realize, wow, it sure would be great to have maybe that lady like Tamara come out and just be with me the first day I go to work so I can figure out what's going on, because they're just not giving me the opportunity to use the strategies that I need in order to be successful. Then guess what? All you have to do is plunk it into place. If you have that realization and you haven't started the process, it can take some time, not as much as it used to, but it can take several weeks, maybe months to get those things in place. So I would definitely encourage everyone to consider that as they move forward. And I hope that also addresses the question about how the services differ. What other questions do we have from our participants?
Tamara or Smosh, do you have anything you want to add about supported employment?
I do. I want to add, first of all, that I wake up every day so super pumped to do what I do, because the name is just what it sounds like. It might be packaged in a job coach. It might be packaged. You might hear supported employment. You might hear ESO, but really, I'm just there to help. I'm there to support. And so anything that my clients are thinking of that make them a little extra nervous, or maybe they've never experienced before, if you've never had a job, how do you write a first resume? You write it based on the things that you've done out in the community, things that you've done with your family. We kind of piece it together. We piece together a first resume based on, what do you like to do? Those kind of things. And so I think that a combination of that mixed in with sometimes just being able to be there to support someone if they've never done something for the first time, and then we do it together. There's real power in that. There's real power in being nervous about something, but knowing that you have your job coach right there with you. And so maybe that first time you do it, you might be nervous, maybe even the second or third time, but then eventually you're going to get to the point that, okay, you can do it on your own. Those are all those I just said this to a parent last week, but there are those life muscles that if you haven't done certain things before, how would you ever be able to pick something up? How would you ever be able to do anything in life if you've never done it before? So we do all those little things to pick them up and put them down, and pick them up and put them down until we have a tool belt of an arsenal of tools that we can use to kind of get through life. And so, I think as parents and families out there, I really approach everything that I do like we're a team. And I say that a lot, and I know it probably drives some folks nuts, but I think of Amanda and her whole team of people as we're all on the same team. We're all just trying to do the same thing, and that is help. And I know that sounds probably a little oversimplified, but when you kind of peel everything else away, that's really what it is. We're just trying to find out how we can best help the clients that we have, really listen to them and find out what they enjoy, because it's not really only about finding our folks a job. It's about finding them something that they, like me, can wake up really excited to do. So it's not just about getting someone a job, bagging groceries or working in a store or doing whatever. Is this something that they would really enjoy doing? Focusing less on what they can't do and focusing more on all the things that are unique to them that they do really well. I think sometimes even other folks that do supported employment forget that. We get so caught up in, because it's just the way things are, we get caught up in trying to tweak things so that we can place people based on not based on their strengths. And so I always attack it by, all right, this is what you can do, and you can do this, and you can do that. We'll work on these things, but let's focus first on that, and then everything else really does fall into place, and you see some great growth. Families, we're in this as a team. DARS, we're in this as a team. Northstar, we're in this as a team. It really is that kind of mentality. So I think if you go into it with that kind of, like, we're all a team trying to do this, it really, really helps. So that goes from working on resumes, doing mock interviews so that your folks won't be nervous. A lot of my folks that I work with want to know all the steps, and I'm kind of like that too. I want to know, so what are we going to do next? And then what's going to happen? And then, but what if this happens? What will we do? Like, you want to have a backup plan for your backup plan. And so I think, yeah, that's just, I think the biggest part is the support part of it for me, at least as a coach. It's the getting up. All my clients are very different. And how can I support them? So then I get to really, I have to put my thinking cap on. Everyone's going to be different. So I have to really think, how can I best help my clients? That's how I go about it. And then Jessica said everything else.
Tamara, I love that because I really think you've captured the approach. And I talk a lot with 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds and their families. And one of the things that coming from the perspective of a school that I hear is, well, I don't know if I want a prospective employer to even know I have a disability. What if I don't want them to know that I have a job coach? I know how I function in school. I know my accommodations and strategies that I needed to be successful in school, but now, I'm a young adult. I'm figuring out how I want to present myself to the world. And that is totally legit. There's nothing wrong with that. You could access these services and working with an employment specialist or job coach and never disclose that to your employer. That is your private information. And so please know that everything in the supported employment world revolves around several principles, but one of those is client choice. With client choice comes client responsibility. So clients get to choose what services they want from DARS. If they're in the IPE, they can choose to decline them, I should say. Let me clarify that. If they have been determined to be part of the IPE, they can later choose to decline those services. They can choose which ESO they want to work with. They can choose which employment specialist they want to work with if that person is available. And then they can also choose in what way they want to work with them. So the flip side of that is this is an adult service, and clients have the responsibility to pursue this process. That's another piece that comes up frequently as a school. When you're in a school, your services are outlined and protected by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, and that only protects your rights and services as long as you're in a K-12 institution. Once you move out of that and you move into college, or you move into career training, or you move into work, there are a series of other laws that govern those services, and the onus is on you to pursue this process and to pursue these all of the paperwork and the phone calls and maintaining those connections and making sure you're doing what you're responsible for doing. So that code switch can be tricky for our families as they're moving from one to the other. So this is a heads up to know that's coming. And if you ever have a question about, okay, well, the ball's in whose court? What do I do? That's what we're here for. And that's what all of us would be happy to address those questions and help you navigate that space. Everyone who participated is going to receive an email of the PDF of the PowerPoint. At this point, I'm going to wrap up the recorded version. So those of you who are streaming this later, thank you for tuning in and joining us. And for those of you who are participating live, please feel free to hang out for a moment after we stop the recording so that you can ask questions a little bit more privately. Thank you so much. Please feel free to check out our website and attend the next 4 family education nights. They happen monthly, usually the second Tuesday of the month, all the way through March, each covering a different area of transition to adulthood. The next one will be focused on independent living. So we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.